Hey guys, it's Jessica with BU Bloom. So yesterday I was over at the Pacific Design Center in Los Angeles, and it was an event called Conversations with Bradley Cooper, who all of us love so much. He is a super multi-talented force, and as a performing artist I'm also a member of the union, so I did attend that event, and I know many people went to learn a little bit more about perhaps acting, his background, and some tips and just some morsels that they could take with them. But for me, I was really there to hear what he would say about life and how his lessons from life, and just sort of going through some of the challenges that he may have gone through, how he applies that to his career. And the reason why this is so important to me, and an area that I love to talk about, is because in the work that I do as a mind strategist, it's really about working with people's minds to optimize their minds to thrive, right? And to not shut down, and when you are performing, to remain fluid and open and have flow. And so many industries are trying to learn how to hack into flow. And I think creative artists, singers, musicians, songwriters, and performing artists, athletes, we're always tapping into our imagination. So this is an area that I'm really passionate about, especially since as a performing artist, we are the instrument. And if our instrument is not feeling good, if it's not feeling positive, if we're feeling stuck, stagnant, or have a judgment on what we're doing, it can really affect what we output, because we are, again, the instrument. We're the product, we're the service, right? So they're one and the same. And so it's really important to learn how to develop and cultivate a positive mindset for the performing artist. This is a topic I've been invited to speak on coming up in a few short weeks at a university up in Claremont University, and so it's also a class that I just taught for the first time at the union, and so it's for performing artists. We did a 3-month test run of this, and it was really about developing our optimal well-being personally and how that would affect our careers professionally. And the feedback was just incredible. Some of the students that did attend my workshops were actually present yesterday, so I'd love to hear their feedback as well. So I have my cell phone here that I'm going to be looking down at, because I took a few notes. And by the way, it was Bradley Cooper's birthday yesterday, and it was amazing that he chose to share his time with us on his birthday, and I could see why. And he opens up with being just feeling so privileged to be a part of this industry and part of this community, and how being there in front of his peers who came here to hear him speak was such an honor for him. And you could see how his humbleness come through in that, and how it really gave him much joy. So I could see why he wanted to spend his birthday there. And of course, we sang him happy birthday as well and wished him well. So he gave us these morsels, and I was hoping that he looked my way, and I was hoping that he didn't think I was being rude, but I had to write these down in his own words, because these are some of the tools that I have taught my actors, and in seminars that I do even for corporate, because this is applicable to your life in general. So if we get ourselves right, feeling great, then what happens in our careers is limitless. Okay, so he said that the only way to perform is really to be honest, because you give your flesh to it. There you go. The actor and the instrument, we are one and the same. We do give a lot of ourselves. So I ask my actors, how is it that you're feeling, perceiving day to day? What is your mindset like day to day? Because you're giving something of yourself. And it's often why it's hard to actually shed the character when you play a character that you just threw everything into. How many of us have been there? And it's so hard sometimes to even let that character go. And so for some people, it could even take much more longer to let that character go. And I completely understand it. And it's actually some people who are not performers will say, why would you do that to yourself? And for us, it's exhilarating. It is when Bradley Cooper mentioned this yesterday, when you feel elevated. That elevated sense of the self is really when you're in that hot pocket, that bullseye that I talk about, in the flow zone. Athletes talk a lot about being in the pocket, being one with the waves. Surfers talk about that. That's like when a performing artist, even at an audition, loses a sense of time, space, doesn't remember what they did, because you lost your mind for a minute. There was nothing in your head about this performance. It was a full body experience. You were in it to win it. And so that's what he was talking about. And so This is why I always ask the actors, how is the self feeling, and how is your mind perceiving, thinking, processing, and is it a positive mindset, and is it a resilient mindset that bounces back, and are you a person who is asset focused versus deficit focused? Do you look at feedback or criticism as feedback, or do you look at it as criticism, right? Those with a growth mindset are people who look at any kind of feedback as something that they can grow and evolve from, even when it's not always the best feedback that you really want to hear. So we spent a lot of time talking about that in my workshops. And he said something that I absolutely loved, and I was thinking, oh gosh, I hope, I saw one of my actors in the back there, and I said, I hope he got that one too, because he was one of the star pupils in the class and has just blossomed, and is just such a beautiful person inside and out. But he said, you have to be willing to fail. You have to have no self-conscious awareness, and that's how you get the gold. And that's what he learned from Vince Vaughn, watching Vince Vaughn. And I thought that was amazing. So in my workshop, I have my actors practice the words "I failed," but in a very joyful, happy way, to make a positive association that failure is not a negative thing. Failure allows you freedom. Failure is freedom to give something a try that you haven't tried before, that you're not in your comfort zone, that you're pushing yourself a little bit more. And did you know, to get into flow, you actually have to push yourself a little bit more, okay? So be open and willing to do that, and be willing to fail. And if you don't have such a great audition, or if the doors are closed on you, I mean, Bradley Cooper talked about emailing so many directors, even after he was known, emailing directors and not getting a response back, but that didn't mean that he was going to stop, So when you go to an audition or a meeting and it doesn't go so well, what do you ask yourself? Do you take a moment to ask yourself, how could that have gone better? What could I have done? Is there anything that I learned that I didn't know just before I entered that room? Did I come out with something that I didn't know before? Something that can grow in my character, in my wisdom, in my knowledge, in my performance. And that is having what we call a growth mindset. His theme throughout the night, which I absolutely love, was hope. And I thought about that, and I said to myself, hope is having optimism and preparation and expectation. Hope is having optimism, preparation, and expectation. And so often, as actors, we're very, in the fantasy world, and we hope for so much, but are you prepared? He has this amazing story that he shared about working on his voice and having so much prep time with his voice before he even shot the movie, so that when he was about to sing, it just flowed right out of him. He didn't have to be in his thinking, in his consciousness, in his thinking brain. He could go into the feeling part of the brain and give you everything he had from his gut. And I absolutely appreciate that, because it is about holding optimism, right? And being optimistic, but doing your work as a performing artist, making sure your instrument is the best that it can possibly be, and then having the expectation that it will come to pass. And so he also said something about, which made me chuckle a little bit. We talk about this in my class as well, about ego. Ego is important because in some ways, as athletes, performers, people who are, all about peak performance, our ego drives us to get in front of people and be competitive and do the things that we do, and have the chutzpah to do what we do. But also ego can be something that can protect you and keep you from trying a risk or taking a bold move, right? So always keep that in mind and ask yourself, is my ego at play here? But in the example that Bradley Cooper gave, which I thought was phenomenal for directors to take a note on, he said he's worked with people before where he's asked himself, is this director talking to me from his ego or from a place of love? And when it's from the ego, he said it completely shuts him down. So why does that happen? Because when we feel that someone is not coming from a place of love, and it's really from a place of proving and control, or it's something that comes from the ego in essence, then our ego sometimes comes into play and says, screw that, I'm not coming here to participate in that, I'm not even going to engage in that, and it shuts down our creative flow. Also, ego is the number one thing that can actually shut you from being creative, because if it's there to protect you and it's there to keep you, not looking silly, if you will, not taking a risk, if you will, then that's exactly what happens. So it shuts down the creative part of the brain. It gets you back into the protection mode, and then the creative flow can't come through. So when he said that, I thought, wow, I wonder if the actors understand why that actually happens in the physical body, right? Or even at a workplace. You could be at a workplace where somebody, a manager, is talking to you and you don't feel like it's coming from a place to help you grow or to help you try something new, but it's coming from a place of ego. The moment that happens, it probably shuts you down, right? We've all been there before. So I have a way of helping my actors reverse that so that that doesn't happen to you, because you will work with people like that in every kind of business. So I call it reverse the verse. There's a lot of tools and techniques that I give them in order to redirect that so that it doesn't affect you. Let it affect them, but do not let it keep you from your glory and telling your story. So another thing that he mentioned was that you can choose how you want to live no matter what. This was an awesome story about him and Clint Eastwood. They went to go visit someone and they stayed at a Days Inn, and he was just so surprised that Clint came without entourage. It's just him driving in an 80s something Audi or car or something like that, he mentioned. And how he had called him and said, hey, do you want to go grab some yogurt? And he's like, I don't think that they have yogurt at the Days Inn, but maybe we can go across the street to the pharmacy or something like that, he mentioned. So it was a really funny story. But what he took from that in observing Clint Eastwood was, wow, he really is choosing how he wants to live. Despite that he's part of this amazing industry, glitz glamour, he chooses how he wants to have his day-to-day go. And does he want it to be glitz and glamour? Does he want it to be very grounded and accessible to others? So you too, you get to choose how you want to live your life every single day. Just yesterday, actually, before I went to the event, I was over visiting the prison, the women's prison again, and there's a project called the Freedom to Choose Project, that even though you are in prison, your mind has the freedom to choose whether you are free or not free. And Viktor Frankl has, his book was amazing. This psychiatrist that was at the concentration camps, and the difference between those who lived and survived were the ones who exercised that freedom to choose as to whether their mind was going to feel free or not free, and what was their why to live. And those that were connected to a why and a purpose and made that choice in their mindset were the ones who thrived. And so I see a lot of, like, there was so many interesting things he was saying that I wish I could interview him myself, because there's much more depth there that goes beyond the profession, but really about leading a meaningful life. So he also said, that he was free to explore as an actor on the movie A Star is Born, because he was also the director. So in that opening scene where he's looking at the lights and making sure everything is there, and he had like 4 minutes or less to make it happen because they were actually at a live concert, his thinking brain, the analytical portion of the brain, was what was lit up, right? And so he was very much about getting all those things correctly done. So because of that, his creative side was able to, totally blossom and jump in and perform as a singer. And he said that was Jackson performing, that was not Bradley. Had it been Bradley, I would have fallen apart. And so why? Because he did the prep work before. It's like athletes. They practice and practice and practice beforehand, visualizing, imagining their positive outcomes, even using some of these techniques. And then when it comes to showing up and making that performance or that play happen, they step right into that flow zone. And they're not in the conscious thinking brain. It literally is the subconscious, the automatic pilot taking over. And it is amazing to watch. I'm sure all of you guys absolutely loved the opening. It just grabbed you right in, and you really saw that character right away come to life. And so we talk a lot about that in my classes, of how to give the thinking brain a load off so that you can get into that flow. I'll give you another example. Those of you who exercise, if you're ever thinking about a problem and then you go and you work out, and all of a sudden the problem resolves itself and an idea just comes up into your mind space, that's because you weren't so focused from an analytical perspective on the issue. You were able, the brain actually reorganizes itself, and then all of a sudden you're using your optimal brain power, which is pretty awesome. So I love it. He said, when I was out of my head as the actor, that was when I was able to perform my best. Of course, you know, we talk about this, you know, are you performing from your head? Because when you're in your head, you're dead, right? You want to bring the conscious, subconscious, the physical body, all of this into your performance to give a whole being performance. And that's when you feel like you've elevated, like he says. He says that's when he's able to have fun, living in his imagination, and elevating from there. That's where those performances spark. And I absolutely love that, because that's everything that I speak about, is about accessing your imagination, because your imagination is actually much more powerful than even reality if you would just exercise that muscle of your brain. It is important. Albert Einstein was famous for talking about this. All of his solutions to these incredible mathematical problems came because he literally accessed his imagination, the what ifs, what is possible. And he said knowledge is not more powerful than imagination. Imagination is much more valuable than knowledge, because knowledge already exists, but imagination will take you to a whole nother world to discover, to explore, to be free. Like he says, Bradley Cooper, to be free to explore and discover something new, which is incredibly freeing as an actor. And that's when he says he's able to elevate. So hope was a huge theme throughout, and he said it so many times, and I absolutely love it. But it's about having that optimistic, positive mindset called the growth mindset, having being prepared. Be prepared. Just don't think it's just going to happen, but really prepare yourself to the best that you can, and then having that expectation. And as he said, surround yourself with your cheerleaders. That's one of my tips on my Instagram, which is be your first cheerleader, be your first like, be your first heart. The moment you post something, the moment you say something, the moment you do something, you be your first cheerleader, and you'll be in good shape. And surround yourself with a positive tribe. He didn't call it tribe, but he was saying, when you find good people, keep those people close to you. Okay, I think that's so important. And one really fun fact that he shared last night as well was that, so he said a lot about luck as well. There is luck, right? That is part of this business and a part of a lot of these entrepreneurial endeavors that we take on. But he mentioned a friend of his that showed up in the movie. And it's the scene where he and Lady Gaga are in the bar when they originally, in the beginning, get together, and this man comes up to him and asks him to take a picture because he looks like the dude that his wife was sleeping with, and no way does Jackson look like that dude, and he wants to prove it to his wife. So he was kind of a jerk about it, and then Lady Gaga punches him in the face and decks him out. It's a really funny scene, and the actor delivered it brilliantly. So that's his actual friend, and he said that's the beauty about being a director and bringing in somebody so talented that maybe hasn't had that break yet, but is so damn talented and delivers on the good, where Bradley could turn around and say, see, to everybody on the production team, see, I told you he's got it. And he had it. So I hope we see more of him too. But isn't that pretty neat? So I hope that you guys found an amazing amount of information there, tools, tips, things for your personal well-being. I'm all about be you bloom, and take these things into your performance career, any career for that matter. And to Bradley Cooper, happy birthday. You were amazing last night. You gave us so much more. We hope to hear more.